Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Webster, and I'm a lecturer in the study of religion in the Faculty of Divinity at Cambridge. And in this Quick Bites talk, what I want to talk about is religion and climate change denial, anthropological perspectives. I want to begin by asking the question, why do some people deny climate change? And I think it's important to admit at the outset that this question is often posed rhetorically with the aim of dismissing those who deny climate change as idiotic. Really, the question is internally phrased, how could someone be so stupid as to not believe in the reality of climate change? I think it's also worth noting that this type of dismissal seems most justified in people's minds, at least, when climate change denial is motivated by religious conviction. This, I think, is akin to how many people within the public at large would react to religiously motivated denials of the theory of evolution and the scorn that would be poured onto creationist science. And whilst this type of scorn might seem at face value relatively understandable, justified even in some people's minds, I want to suggest that this type of ridiculing of the other, whilst it may give us a sense of validation, a sense of self-affirmation, it isn't likely to help us understand the motivations, the perspectives of that other. Anthropology, however, offers via ethnographic fieldwork a very different approach. It's a mode of research dedicated to living within a community, observing and participating and listening to that community. And crucially, as anthropologists learn about the perspective of the other, the results are often surprising and unsettling, especially if the communities that we are researching somehow felt previously anathema to our own perspectives. What anthropology does, what ethnographic fieldwork does then, is it disarms our rather blunt assumption that we are right, here we being generally the liberal progressive mindset, that we are right and they are somehow wrong. That type of assumption, when you robustly engage with ethnographic fieldwork, simply becomes untenable. The question then becomes, to what extent can we apply this ethnographic rapport building to religiously motivated climate change deniers? That is a question which I had to grapple with in my own fieldwork in Gamrie, a small fishing village in the northeast of Scotland, which, as well as being dominated by the fishing industry, was also captivated by a very particular type of Protestant fundamentalism. The village itself had a population of only 700 people, but was home to 6 churches, which made it the village with the largest number of churches per head of population anywhere in Scotland. Gamrie has 3 exclusive Brethren fellowships, 1 open Brethren assembly, and 2 Presbyterian churches. And all 6 of these places of worship had been strongly influenced by John Nelson Darby's dispensationalist theology. This is a theology of the end of the world, which says that the present day is to be experienced through an apocalyptic mindset as the penultimate era of human history, the last of the last days, which meant that local people in Gamrie experienced their present day as an eschatological precipice. The end of the world really was imminent in their daily experience. More than this, dispensationalism is animated, it's made alive, it's made persuasive by a search for signs of the times which evidence the fact that the apocalypse really is soon to occur. In Gamrie, a key source of this sign searching was the fishing industry and its regulation by the European Union both before and after Brexit. And this really crystallized, especially in relation to how the fishing industry and climate science and environmental politics link up as a nexus of concerns as a result of the 2009 Copenhagen climate change conference, which became a major talking point in the village. It became a major source of apocalyptic sign searching. And what I've got here on the slide is a quote from a Gamrie preacher describing why he regarded global warming and climate change not only to be not happening, but actually to be a demonic hoax, a kind of plot to distract people away from what he regarded as the true gospel of born-again salvation. Have a look at this quote then. He says, his return will be unannounced, apart from the signs that we read in the Word of God. Climate change, it's the new religion. They are going to save the world on their own terms. And he continues, a great day of judgment is coming. You see, climate change, this is the new gospel, by which he means the new fake gospel. Are we spending more time and effort on climate change than we are on proclaiming the gospel? They are trying to save the world. This quote and many other ethnographic observations I made during my research showed to me that local people in Gamrie had a view of climate change which regarded it as a false eschatology, a false salvationist religion, a false evangelism, and even a false blasphemy. It was a false eschatology because Christians in Gamrie recognized that climate change said that the world was in peril because of rising sea levels, not what they regarded to be the true biblical reality, fire from heaven. Equally, people in Gamrie saw the climate change agenda as a false salvationist religion, humans saving themselves on their own terms without God, by cutting carbon rather than being washed in the blood of Christ, as they would say it. Equally, we can understand from a local perspective climate change as a false evangelism. Think of Al Gore and his documentary tour, An Inconvenient Truth, and here Al Gore taking the place of Billy Graham and his own Christian crusade. Think as well about climate change in this local perspective as a kind of false blasphemy. Here local people recognized that what they were saying, what they were preaching, had taken on a kind of shocking and almost blasphemous status. They felt judged for denying climate change, and they felt that this denial of climate change had become more shocking to secular people than, for instance, denying the existence of God. We can take those different examples, those different eschatological or apocalyptic viewpoints of local people in Gamrie, and then try and reverse engineer from there how and why they came to those perspectives. And in addition to reading the Bible, my own informants in Gamrie were careful observers of the world around them. So, for instance, one of my close informants spent a lot of time talking with me and critiquing Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. And he walked me through his interpretation of that presentation, of that DVD, saying that what Al Gore was doing was producing his own secular signs of the times. Hurricanes, tornadoes, heat waves, famines, droughts, mosquito plagues, and so on. It's even the case, this informant told me, and I checked, and he's right, that Al Gore himself states in his presentation that the soon-to-occur climate disaster is like a nature hike through the book of Revelations. We could also turn to the campaign 100months.org, a website which is now defunct but was put on by the New Economics Foundation, which was a large red ticking clock counting down to the point of no return. We have 100 months to save our climate. When the clock stops ticking, we could be beyond our climate's tipping point, the point of no return. In Gamrie, from a dispensationalist mindset, this type of apocalyptic date setting is a secular misappropriation of what they read in their Bibles, particularly in the book of Revelation. 100months.org then seems to be environmentalism repackaged as dispensationalism. Think even about an example which became very well known after my fieldwork, and the Extinction Rebellion logo here being a sand timer. The idea that time is running out. Look at the banner, climate change, 12 years to save Earth. Whether we agree with the Christians of Gamrie or not in their interpretation of climate change as a demonic hoax seems to be somewhat beside the point as a result, because instead what we have is a rival search for signs, a shared effort of trying to make sense of the evidence that the world really is in peril. This leads me to my final point, which is, to what extent can we find uncomfortable and yet useful common ground between dispensationalism and evangelism? The well-known geographer Mike Hume states very clearly in his book Why We Disagree About Climate Change that he feels uncomfortable that climate change is widely reported through the language of catastrophe and imminent peril. And Hume, if he wanted to, could point to a counter case, Operation Noah, a Christian NGO pressure group focused on climate change that seems to be making that exact point. My point is somewhat different from Hume's, however, and I don't necessarily feel uncomfortable with the way that climate change is being reported through the language of catastrophe, but rather intrigued by it. And my suggestion is that there is, as well as a rival search for signs operating within dispensationalism and environmentalism, there's also a series of shared observations and shared viewpoints. A shared eschatology that the world is facing oblivion, a shared soteriology that the world is indeed worth saving, a shared evangelism that truth must be spread, and a shared horror of blasphemy that truth denial is somehow anathema. My suggestion in conclusion then is that by adopting the stance of the other, anthropology shows us a different inconvenient truth to the one that Gore is talking about, namely one that we are not so very different to them, nor are they so very different from us. And it's that observation about shared perspectives which I think offers a way forward in trying to find a path for agreement on the issue of climate change.